Hello everyone, my name is Osama Hassan. I am from C Lab, Queen's University. Today I am presenting my research work named Empirical Study and Developer Discussions in Gitter platform. This paper has already been published in ACM Transactional Software Engineering and Methodology. So let's start with a brief introduction. Developers nowadays are discussing their issues, their different topics in the chat rooms, and there are different chat room platforms available like Gitter, Stack Overflow Chat, and Slack, where developers post a question and then they have a discussion with other developers, and their problem is solved. For example, here is an example of a problem where an asker has posted a question with his code, and he asked for the solution. Another respondent basically asked for the clarification of the problem, and eventually this problem is solved. So developers are basically part of multiple chat rooms, ideally, and if they are away for some time in the most popular chat room, there are a lot of messages and that are unread. So it is not feasible for developers to read all of the unread messages. Regardless, they would need some summarization or some useful information from all of these messages that they have missed. Let's see another example where a developer has asked about a CSS issue again, and they have basically other respondent has shared another resource for him to read, and he also provided a solution for him. And eventually it goes on and the solution is solved, as the asker said that your solution works perfectly. Other than that, this issue was related to Chrome, but we can see that if anyone else has an issue related to Firefox, he can get help from this thread as well. Other than this, there are some messages that are not part of this discussion that is going on, so those are irrelevant from the current discussion. So we would want to extract the useful discussions, and we would keep in mind that we do not want these irrelevant messages in those threads. So based on this goal, we started with our approach, and we collected data from 856 public chat rooms, and we extracted nearly 11 million messages from all of these chat rooms. Then we pre-processed this chat data, and we collected features of the chat room messages that we collected, and then we identified threads using our algorithm, and finally we have research question. So let's start with the identification of threads. For identification, we started with a random statistical sample of chat room messages, and we identified that there are three metrics from which we can identify threads. First is developer metrics, next is content metrics, and then communication metrics. Let's see them one by one. For the developer and content metrics, we have involvement group and background group for them respectively. So let's suppose if anyone asks a question, we directly put that asker in the involvement group. And if anyone else mentions him, mentions the asker, we put that user as well in the involvement group. And as their discussion goes on, if any other user joins in, we also put that user in the involvement group. For the bigram group, we collect the two words that occur consecutively, and we put them in the bigram group. And eventually, if any other messages have same bigram group, we assume that these are from the same discussion. Third metric is the communication metric, in which if the users or the developers are discussing their issue without any mention or any of the communication metrics or developer metrics that we already said, but they go on for at least 3 times without mentioning. So we suppose that they are talking to each other and they are part of a same discussion. So we put that user who responded initially to the involvement group as well. So using all these 3 metrics, we identified the threads, and here is an example of a sample thread that have been identified by our algorithm. So we can see here that our algorithm is able to identify threads even if they are overlapping, so it treats them as a different thread. So based on this, we have 3 research questions. We would look at them one by one. So the first research question is, what is the accuracy of the proposed approach for identifying a discussion thread? So for this one, out of all of the messages, we see that 62.7% of the messages trigger a discussion. So it means they are part of a thread. So we can see that 420,000 messages do not get any response from any other developers. So we took a statistical sample of 384 threads out of this, and we reviewed them, and we saw that 81% of the identified threads are correct, and all the messages in them were part of a single discussion. For the research question, for the second research question, we try to see the response behavior of the developers in the chat room. For this purpose, we first identify user and message features related to, for example, message features include code snippets and URLs in the message, and user features is the one who posted that message, and we see his GitHub contributions, how active a contributor he is in the chat room and GitHub. So based on this, we performed an analysis. We performed an analysis on two types of responses. First is engagement of developers. So it means whether developer respond to any question or not. And second is faster discussion time. So it means how fast they respond. So based on our results, it seems that including URLs with less information has negative impact on getting a response. So whenever you want to use URL, you should explain properly what is in the URL. And inactive participants in chat rooms are more likely to get a response, which is good because beginners would get encouraged from this. In the step 3, we use mixed effect model to analyze developer behavior pattern. So for both of the responses that we did in the previous slide, as we see, so we try to see that if there are any clusters that represent same behavior. So for the first response, we identified 4 different patterns or clusters, in which there are respondents who mainly respond to an active asker, and in the other group there are respondents who mainly respond to inactive members. So some chat rooms behave differently, and other chat rooms behave in some other type. So for the response to, we also find 3 different clusters, and in which respondents who mainly participate in quick discussion on long messages during non-office hours. And then there are, in the second cluster, there were respondents who mainly participate in quick discussion during office hours on simple questions. These are the different clusters, and the developer can see which cluster their chat room belongs to, and they can see the analysis. For the research question 3, we extracted statistical sample of 384 threads. In the first step, we identify the resolution types of the thread, and also the reasons why the threads are not resolved. For the reasons the threads are resolved, it says that they can be suggested readings from the developers, they provide a textual explanation, or they propose code fixes, while the unresolution of the thread is usually non-follow-up from the asker or the respondent, or they refer to any other developers if they do not know the answer. In the step 2, we try to identify the topics of the discussion threads, and the topics belong to beginner level, how to questions, and advanced questions. And they basically are either install and configure question, or implementing a coding task, solving a bug, or just trying to enhance your code. So these questions are related to all of these topics. In the step 3, we try to see that how much is the resolution for all of the types of the questions that we have. And we see that 80% of the studied threads are resolved, and the unresolution of the threads related to the users are basically due to non-follow-up of the users, and we see that 90% of the times that users do not respond after initially starting, but they do not follow up. So coming to the implication of our study, for the chatroom askers, we suggest that they should write self-contained questions without a URL if possible. If they want to include a URL, they should explain their problem and what they are sharing in the URL, so other developers can just go to the URL and see what they are sharing. Developers who are asking questions, they should visit the FAQs or recently asked question in the chat room if they can find their solution. And the developers should include code snippet if they are talking about any code related issue, and any reproducibility details for others to understand. For the project maintainers, they should tailor the guidelines for posting questions to be suitable with the response style in your project. As we see that there can be different clusters, and every chat room can belong to a different cluster. So they should see that what is the response style in their project, and they should tailor the guidelines accordingly. And they can use similar threads to form an FAQ that can help the asker before asking any questions. So to summarize my research, we started with the example of the different chat room discussions, and then we identified those discussion firstly we collected data, then we identified those discussion, and then we have research question, we saw the results, and then we have implication for chat room askers and maintainers. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can contact me anytime. Thank you.
Okay, so we're live in the Q&A section. My name is Francisco Servant. I'm gonna chair this Q&A, and we have with us Safwat Hassan and Osama Hassan, and we're ready for questions from the audience. If you have questions about the video, now is a good time. I normally wait a little bit before I ask questions myself. But let's see, do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, so I'll get the conversation started. I found your paper really interesting. Oh, we have one. Good. So Arthur says, thanks for the talk. Are there properties specific to Gitter that would not be applicable to other platforms?
Okay, I think that's a very good question. So the thing with Gitter is that it is directly linked to the GitHub projects. So there is, I think there is no opportunity for the developers to create their own room, or even if they are, then they cannot link it to, for example, other platform like GitLab or maybe Bitbucket. So there is no opportunity like that. So yes, there are properties. For example, any user is posting the message, he has a profile in the GitHub. So all of his activity is related to the GitHub. So yes, that is very specific to like GitHub, and they cannot capture any properties from other platform. If other platforms has something like this and they have integrated chat system, so yes, they can have their own properties.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have other questions from the audience? Did you consider the discussions from code review?
No, not in this study. So our goal in this study was specifically discovering and analyzing the chat that discussion and happens in the basically chat room. So we did not consider any discussion outside of the chat rooms. So, but yes, I think that could be a good suggestion, and that can be included in this one. And we can include, I think, discussions from code reviews, issue reports, pull requests. Those discussion can also be incorporated, and that can broaden the scope of such study.
Yes, I want to also add one point in addition to what Osama raised, that our approach is general, so it can be applied also to other platform of discussion platforms. And our finding also can be valid for other platforms to improve how to write your messages in a clear way, so the discussion is more robustness and useful.
Yes, exactly. It's because of the availability of the data that we use Gitter. It's an open source platform. There's a lot of data, but I think Slack is a very similar tool to this, and there are specialized chat rooms. But if someone has their data, they can use our approach right away, and they can get the similar results.
Thanks. Do we have other questions? Okay, so I'll ask you a question that I really want to ask you while other questions come in the chat. So because like I said, I really enjoyed your paper, and I have this burning question, specifically when you ask in your research question, what makes a question to get responses, right? And something that I can't help thinking of is the culture of the project, right? So did you see any effects, or even if anecdotally, of when developers use the right lingo, or when they speak more like the insiders, they're more likely to get an answer?
Okay, thank you very much first for your appreciation for the paper, and second, that it's a very good question. And due to this question, that I think in our research question too, we did something like this, and we know that there is a culture or environmental difference, like in terms of discussion in different chat rooms. But what we did in that is we basically, the features that we have identified, we tried to cluster chat rooms based on that. We try to see what is the behavior of like this. There are 4 clusters in one behavior and 3 clusters in another one. So we try to see, okay, for this chat room, what is the behavior? For example, we see that some of the chat rooms clusters in one of the clusters, for example, there was more inactive chat room askers, where if an active person is asking a question, they were responded more. While in the other cluster, they were not responded. Rather, the experienced developers are answered more. And in the another one, for example, we see that mentions are a very good identifier that you would be asked responded to a question. So we definitely did the clustering of this because there are different behaviors for different chat rooms. But I think it's a very good suggestion that we can just look at the lingo as well, different keywords, different technical questions that are related to the project, and that would also give us a clusters, and that can, like, for example, I think from this we can see the front-end web frameworks can have a different language, and Java can have a different language, Python can have a different language, so that can cluster very well.
Yeah, because I mean they're probably hard to capture things like attitude or but it would be interesting. Now that you mentioned these clusters, I would be interested, in trying to explain them too, right? Like, given those communities that you've observed, what makes them different according to the features that you measure? That sounds really interesting.
Yes. So one, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So one also point complementary to this. So one of the cultures we can extract from our clustering techniques that sometimes some rooms, if you want to get a quick answer, you use it like the mention. So that means people latently, they have this rule. If you want to get a quick help, mention the person who is knowledgeable. So our technique can be used in any chat platform to detect the latent guiding rules to make a quick answer, and then put them for people who want to get a quick questions, based on reverse engineer the latent culture for developers who communicate in this platform. For example, some platforms, they need very short question. Other platform chat rooms, they need the opposite, very clear, detailed question. So the key idea, as Usama said, we tailor the guidelines for each culture or chat rooms, but we didn't consider that the language, specific Tango that they use. It's a good opportunity for further work that we can further investigate this.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, while we wait for more questions, that's a great segue into another question that I wanted to ask you, which is, now that you have these, representations of the culture, and also a way to capture conversations, do you see opportunities to reuse that information for automatic documentation of the project?
Exactly. So that's what one of our goal is. Basically, there are 2 points to it. One is documentation, as you said. It would be very good, for example, if there are questions related to the installation, or like there is some bug in the installation and dependencies, that can be directly put in the documentation. Another factor related to this is basically frequently asked questions. So if there is some question that is asked very frequently, you can just add it in your FAQs as well. So that can just improve the quality of your discussion in the chat room, and developers can just go to your FAQs before just asking the question in the chat room. So that overall, so from our analysis, we see that the chat rooms which have good response rate are like allowed to get existence, and they do not vanish in some time. So if there is a good response rate and good quality of the chat room, they live more and they live longer. So I think that's one thing that can be very much benefited, that we can get the documentation from it, we can get the frequently asked questions from it. So yeah, I think that would be really good.
Yes, and one also complementary point is, we notice as well that emerging topics can spot the points that need further documentation. If a new release has a certain not well documented API, then our techniques can spot the emerging questions, so they can improve the documentation for their platform as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, those sounds like really useful as well. That's a great point. That it's like finding a bug in the documentation by seeing what people are asking about.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're gonna stop here with only 10 seconds to go. Yeah. Thanks. If there are more questions, you can join the discussion room for the paper, and you